Welcome. My name is Katrin Reisberger. I'm an assistant professor for innovation and technology management at the House of Innovation at Stockholm School of Economics. In today's webinar, we will delve into the topic of rapid commercial experimentation and how to accelerate innovation for your organization. So rapid commercial experimentation is testing the value proposition of commercial innovations before full-scale development, which allows not only startups, but also established companies and large organizations to gauge user interest and test market viability without significant investment in the beginning. By focusing on what potential users do rather than on what they say, which is also called in innovation management the say-do gap, this method provides a valuable tool not only to accelerate innovation, but also to decrease the risk of failure and also enhance cost efficiency. I'm very thrilled to have two of the leading experts on this topic today here with me, Klaus Pertu-Madsen from Telia and Peter Handberger from NOAA Consulting. So Klaus is head of Telia Prototype at Telia Group Strategy and Commercial and has been instrumental in spearheading experiments across all Telia markets. Over the past 3 years, his leadership has significantly accelerated innovation and the growth of the company by embedding rapid commercial experimentation in the core culture of the company. Joining him is Peter Handberger, Business Innovation Lead at NOAA Consulting Sweden. And with over a decade of experience with startups, but also large corporations and governmental organizations, his work is central to assist these companies in driving systematically business innovation on rapid commercial experimentation. Together, they will share their insights and experiences, and we will hear more on how to overcome this say-do gap, but we will also learn on how to implement and benefit rapid commercial experimentation in your innovation process. So let's start and dig deeper into fail fast on unviable ideas and succeed on validated concepts. A quick reminder on how the webinar is structured. After keynotes of Klaus and Peter, we will go into a Q&A and the floor will open up to the audience for, of course, questions. So please feel free to put any questions into the chat at any time they are coming up. I would like to hand over to Klaus for sharing his insights. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting us, and thank you for the great weather here in Stockholm. It's almost as good as in Copenhagen. So before I start, I just wanted to touch upon why I'm so interested in experimentation and why I think it's so important to do when you are part of a big company. So I think it's about 15 years ago, I was leading a big project in a Danish company, and we were supposed to launch a big product into the market. And what we learned in that process was really interesting, because what my team did and I did was we followed the strategic books, go-to-market books. We did everything correctly of how we should launch such a product. We interviewed customers, we had focus groups and all that. And when we launched the product, we were applauded at all staffs, and we were really happy and proud and all that. But really soon after the launch, we really learned that this was a huge failure. The customers was not buying into the product, and after 9 months, the customers and the product was out. We basically pulled the product out of the portfolio, and I was kind of really frustrated over that. We did everything that we should do, so something must be wrong in the process of how we should launch products and services and innovations. So it made me look for evidence of what went wrong, basically. And what I started to lean on was to ask both customers, but also people that understand product development and innovation, what did we do wrong? And one of the things that came back to me when I had these chats with people was that people basically don't do what they say. That's us humans. It's a very human thing to do. So what we saw in the focus groups and the opinion-based interviews was not transferring directly into the learnings that we could utilize on what customers' behaviors was. So there's a difference between what customers say when you ask them about certain products and services or innovations, and what they actually will do in the end of that. And that really sparked some interest in my head. So that was the whole sole reason why I basically started working with innovation and experimentation in that sense. So approximately 3 years ago, I started in this Telia prototype unit, and I have a fantastic team that we work with. So to start off this little session, I just wanted to dive into what David Ogilvy once said, that people don't think what they feel, they don't say what they think, and most importantly, they don't do what they say. And David Ogilvy, who's one of the founding fathers of modern marketing, he understood that quite early on. And this is the core of what we work with in our lead unit, is that when we want to try to understand what the customer's demands are for innovation ideas, yes, you can talk to them and you can get directions from interviews and opinions, but you don't have to rely on opinions only. You have to some sort of way design experiments to understand their behaviors. And that's basically what we do in high numbers. I just took this with us. This is our innovation process, and it probably looks quite similar to most processes that you guys are working with also in your innovation processes. But what we've done here is that we took the experimentation part of understanding what customers' needs are all the way to the front end of the process, meaning that all the way in exploration, we're doing experimentation with customers and the markets to understand if those ideas has any validation in the market. Because if they don't have any validation at that point of stage, we shouldn't continue working on them. And what happens in innovation process is that when you start working towards the end of the process, you fill in more resources, you fill in more cost and funding. And sometimes if you don't test these things in the market before you actually fill in cost and funding, then you just probably waste a lot of your funding and money. So what we've learned over the past few years, testing over hundreds of different experiments and concepts from innovation to business development, is that 90% of all ideas and concepts, they stop at the earliest stage of the process. And what we always do in my little team is that we always test the market and the customer segments for interest to start with. So it's a kind of a sequence we test towards. So if we can't create any interest in the market for a new concept, we shouldn't test for willingness to pay or desirability. But if you validate the interest in the market firstly, then we can go to the next sequence, which is desirability, which is a little more depth in the action-based and behaviors that you need from the customers. And in the end of that, then the willingness to pay, where you actually test price points and the concept's end points. And only if we do that, we actually take it further into a funding round to actually start understanding if this is feasible. We haven't understood yet whether we could build this or not, but only if we validate all these 3 steps, we take it further. So maybe some of you will sit down now and think about what these kind of experiments look like. So I've taken a few examples with me from what we've done over the past few years. So this one is not really an external thing. This is an internal thing we did because we were approached by one of our legal teams in Telia, where the legal team that works with AI basically and compliance, where all of us that works in Telia, and whenever we use an AI tool, we have to some sort of document which kind of data we put in there and how we use it and what kind of purpose we use it for. And the way the legal team has orchestrated that process was with a very, let's say, rigid and large Excel sheet, which was very difficult to fill out. And I could understand why nobody was actually filling that out. And that was the core issue they had. So they wanted us to make a creative process to understand how could we make that documentation much easier. And after the creative process, we found this solution, basically to have a chatbot where people or colleagues from Telia that was utilizing AI tools could chat with a chatbot to understand what they should be using it for, what kind of data they use it for, and then transform that automatically into documentation. So instead of just going out and build that, we said, let's test it out to customer or internal customers first. And we found an internal Yammer group where we had 600 good people and good colleagues from the company that was active in there. And then we tested this little ad towards them. And then we said, if we can get 10% of the audience to sign up or apply to be part of the beta program, then that's a validation. And we got 50% of sign up from this group of 600. So 300 people actually and 300 colleagues signed up for utilizing this. So this is now in progress. So the beta group is all active. So there's 300 collective people that is working on this. So this is interesting, and hopefully this will reach the internal market within a few weeks and months. This one is a consumer case. So we had a team of all the 5 countries. We have all the leads of the commercial units from the consumer business was talking about one of the issues they had was that the post-COVID roaming revenue we have on people that is traveling outside the EU was really not picking up as it should be. So there was an issue about how we offered our roaming services towards the customer base. So what we did was that we took that issue and then we formed a small team on that, and we created 13 different offers that we don't have today, and we tested them in all 5 countries in three different variants to understand which one actually stood out. So basically a complex A/B test we made here, and we tested in iterations of 3 times to understand more and more. And one was the clear winner. And that was a concept and an offer that we don't have today. And basically the concept was that the customers wanted to have more control, basically be able to buy for 1 hour or 1 day a roaming package instead of buying a subscription for a week or for a month. So that was a clear learning for us. And this is also in development at the moment. We also have B2B cases, and one of the issues that we have with multinational customers where they have offices in many of our countries is that whenever a customer needs to admin some of their subscription, they have to go into the local self-service portals, meaning that if you have a customer in Sweden, Norway and Finland, then they have to go into three different self-service portals to actually admin their subscriptions and contracts. So we wanted to build an overlay self-service portal towards that, but we didn't know how and what we should build in there. So we made 3 different services and self-service platforms for the customers. And then, as you see on the right side, this is a direct email and then a screenshot of it. And this one was the winner, a ChatGPT-like interface where the customers don't need to learn a self-service formal and architecture, but basically just have to chat to a chatbot, and that chatbot will reverse you into the areas that you need to work within. And there we got a quite substantial also a validation from the market. So this one is also in development at the moment. And I think, no, I don't have the last one, but before I want to end on that one is that we also test in retail. And as Catherine alluded to, that testing is super easy done, because when we only test for interest in the beginning. The testing is not for 10,000 people or 100,000 people or customers. We only need around 500 unique users to give the evidence of what their behaviors are before we can conclude the first crystallization of what they think and they do. And reaching 500 unique users on let's say a Facebook platform or a LinkedIn platform is relatively easy and relatively cheap. So that's the starting point we always start with. And you always iterate deeper and deeper the more validation you get, but that's the starting point, and that gives you the right direction. So what we basically do in the team that I'm running is that we're decreasing the risk of decision making, and we're accelerating the speed of innovation, because this makes the entry to innovation much easier, because now you don't have to get into a board for your pitch your idea. You don't have to go to the middle manager for pitching your idea. You have to ask basically me and give me your idea, and then we go out and test that. And then the market and the customers are the judge of your idea in the end of that. And before I hand over to Peter, I just want to allude to the learnings I've had, and if any one of you guys out there also wants to bring this more into your businesses, is that there's a key notion here, and that's curiosity. People need to be very curious about what they do, and I've invented this word, thoughtland. So keep out of your head, basically. Don't think too much and too long about your ideas. Have a bias towards getting it tested in the marketplace. Go out to talk to customers. Design experiments so that you can get the behavioral learnings back from the customers. And be super focused on learning from the experiments, not necessarily on revenue or another kind of success criteria. My team is measured on the number of experiments we do every year, because we want to extend the learning. So we are all about learnings, and learnings is something that you can only do if you measure on it. Because if we were measured on, let's say, revenue, we would not drive most of the cases we were driving, because this is just different, basically. And in our case, we recruit a small team of experts. Having an expert that knows something about early stage experimentation is really crucial. And to get it into the culture, as you said, Catherine, you need to have support around you to give this, because this is different. It's different to go into experimentation. This is not design thinking, which is very broadly known. This is not just lean startup thinking. This is something different. So having that support and nudging element from the leadership is super important to go forward. And I guess whenever you have questions, bringing them in, because there'll probably be a lot of questions around this, because this is a tough part, and probably Peter will also talk about this. Getting experimentation as part of the culture is super difficult. Having a small team doing it at high level, much easier. So not to take too much time, Peter, maybe you should take the stage then.
Sure. All right.
Cool.
Thank you, Klaus. I represent NOA Consulting, as Catherine mentioned, and we are management consultants specialized in customer-driven growth, and we do that through two different ways: profitable positioning and business innovation. And business innovation is the area that I represent, and we're part of the North Alliance, which is a Nordic network of agencies. But I'm gonna start with the story of how I got into this space. So I worked 10 plus years in both as a consultant, but also before that in startups and entrepreneurship. So I've been testing ideas and using this approach for around 10 years. And this is an example of a personal project, not that long ago actually. So a few years ago, I had this idea of what if I could sell black pepper on subscription? Like, that sounds great, doesn't it? But instead of quitting my job and betting the farm on this, I decided to test it through this approach that we're talking about and that I will go deeper into. So what I did, I created a landing page through third-party tools, presenting this new service called Pepparbrev, so pepper mail basically. It's just a facade, so there's basically nothing behind these buttons. Then I paid for some Instagram ads to see if I can drive traffic to this page, and if and when people landed on this page and clicked the "I want to subscribe" button, this is the message they saw. So great to see you're interested. The pepper store hasn't opened yet, but sign up here and you'll be first in line to know when we're launching. So I basically spent like less than 24 hours, a couple of thousand crowns on the ads, to realize that in this first iteration it wasn't the demand in the market. I've kept iterating, but it was the first sign that, okay, I need to keep working on this. It's paused, I should say, right now. So I kept my job and worked on other ideas. But anyway, this is just an example of where I come from and where this type of method from the startup and entrepreneurship space is quite familiar. But what we're doing then at NOA Consulting and what Klaus also showed, so how do you apply these methods on a bigger scale, so on large enterprises, established companies, which is a challenge, but even more value if you can do that. So just a quick glimpse on our kind of point of view here, how we talk about innovation with our clients. And we see it as innovation often being stuck in no man's land, or maybe I should say no customer's land. So these metaphors, you should see them as metaphors, of course. So the conference room, where there are lots of like shiny business cases, you have PowerPoint decks of really visionary ideas, basically saying that yes, if you do this, you'll be rich. And like focused on the logic of numbers and so on. And then you have what we call the lab, which represents creativity, design thinking, prototyping, where you might go out and ask 10 customers, what do you think about this idea? And you get some opinions back. And those are both great. Those are both needed. The problem, the way we see it, is that there's something missing here in the middle. And that's quite obvious to me what that is. That's reality. So because there are no real customers in the lab or in the conference room, there are no real money there to really get this data on whether someone would actually buy your new thing or not. So the way forward is combining the logic of the conference room, the magic of the lab, so to say, and doing that in reality to get this data. So this is how we kind of talk about this and see this. Our program, just to put it in context, we have a program called 12 by 12, one of our kind of products, one of our offerings, which promises that in 12 weeks we generate commercially validated business concepts that can create new revenue within 12 months. And as you see in here, it's quite near. It's 12 months, so it's looking at new revenue streams, new offerings, propositions, in quite near term. But it's also bendable and flexible. So sometimes it's like we do it 16 weeks on a 2-year horizon, or 8 by 14. So it's flexible, it's bendable, and it's also modular. So sometimes we come in and do in the ideation phase. Sometimes we come in the focusing on validating ideas that exists. But this represents the systematic innovation process that we apply, which is very, very much, I'd say, it's quite similar to what Klaus showed. And if you're familiar with innovation management, this is kind of what things usually looks like. And what we're going to focus on here then is, of course, the validation phase. And the result of what we're doing in this process is basically decision guidance, building up sequentially building up data and evidence that shows, and confidence that shows that this is what we should bet on here. We have the evidence and the data to back that up. We divide our testing into 3 different phases, which we call sweep test, heat test, and deep test, and they represent different. For one, they represent different quantities of ideas. So the sweep test, which is all about prioritizing a big volume of ideas in the projects we do, but 50 to 100 ideas, which is basically a survey asking, if this existed, would you be interested? Would you be interested enough to pay? So it's still opinions, but it gives us a stacked rank of, these are the maybe 20 or 10 ideas that we should focus on next in this specific project that we're running. And then we move into the heat testing, which is where the commercial experimentation begins in our process, which is about validating, falsifying ideas. And we usually do that, as just like Klaus showed, through either social media ads or direct emailing. And this is where we gauge attention and interest to see if can we actually generate interest in these concepts, which then leads us to what we call a deep test, where we actually do landing pages. We flesh out the proposition even more, and are able to measure purchase intent. So through this kind of funnel, there's an increased level of confidence and evidence. There's also an increased level of granularity and fidelity in how these propositions are presented. And I'll show you one more example pretty soon. But it's really important to remember that, like going back to what I call the logic and magic, that there is really the magic of making things really concrete and tangible here, and the logic of getting that hard data, that behavioral data. That's a great combination here, and you shouldn't underestimate that tangibility and that magic. It's really, really, really important. So to give you one example of a brand that we've been working with, so as many of you might have probably noticed, about a year ago, the Nordic Choice Hotels with the great founder Petter Stordalen, they did this big transition to becoming Strawberry with new ambitions and new visions for what this brand could become. And as part of that, so Noah was a big partner in making that happen. One of the projects we did was to kind of find new propositions, new benefits that could spearhead this, to kind of show the direction towards this new future position, which was to become more relevant to more people more often. So we went through this innovation process. I'll show you one concrete example in a second. And about 6 months later, 5 new offerings were actually launched. And I'll show you how one of them looked when we did the actual experiment. So imagine you live in a a small flat downtown Stockholm or Copenhagen, and your family is coming to visit. So the idea here with this concept was to see, could we position Strawberry as this spare bedroom? So we came up with this service called Be My Guest, which was one of 12 concepts that came to this last phase. And we tested this towards the existing customer base. So you got this email. If you clicked activate my Be My Guest discount, you landed on this landing page. Really simple one, saying that send your mother-in-law to us with 15% discount. And on this landing page, if you clicked activate again, you reach this message. Thanks for your interest. The booking system for Be My Guest is under development, but you can already book through your own account. And this way we could measure in these different steps, these different conversion steps, and get an idea of which of these propositions we're testing will be successful. So a one concrete example of how a test can look. And that's basically it for me right now.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Klaus. I would suggest we open now up the floor for questions from the audience. And before doing that, I have one question which is burning under my nails. Klaus, you said there are also other innovation methods like design thinking, agile, lean startup. We all know them. They are quite known, popular during the last few years. Why is experimentation not as widespread as it could be, giving all the benefit?
I think it's a very good question, I've tried to answer it multiple times, and I don't think I have the perfect answer yet to it. But I think overall, if you take design thinking, it was a pretty thoroughly process that was sponsored by a lot of universities and is basically taught in universities and MBA courses around the globe at the moment. And there's a part of that's called prototyping. So experimentation is built into the process, sort of. So it's the same with lean startup and the same with agile thinking, where prototyping and experimentation is kind of part of the method. But taking it out as a standalone element and skill becomes a little bit unsecure for a lot of decision makers. So if you go to the C-level suite of most companies, you say design thinking, they understand it. They've probably also been to D-school in some of them. But if you talk about commercial experimentation, most of them don't have a clue about what that is as a field and as an approach. So we have a lot of learning to do to a lot of business decision makers for making that happen. But if you apply design thinking, then you should also think about applying experimentation, not as the prototyping step, but actually as a step before the design thinking. Because a lot of the time when you do design thinking, you spend a lot of time inside before you go outside. And when you go outside, you almost always test the user experience and the customer journey, and not the premise of the idea yourself. So when we try to do it, we always try to put the experimentation before that, because then the input to the design thinking process is much sharper. So I don't have the picture perfect answer, but I think it's the knowledge about the experimentation part which is not that widespread.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and I think the thing with so my lab and conference room, it's quite comfortable to be in those places, because going outside of these into reality and actually testing things where there are real customers, it takes a bit more effort. And I think that's also one thing. It's not once you've done it, you realize, well, we should do this all the time. But taking that step, I think, it's quite nice in here.
Exactly, it's leaving the comfort
zone
zone in a way. Yes.
And there's also a fear of when you first fall in love with an idea, you create biases around that idea, and if you actually confront that with the reality, there's a pretty good chance that will basically fail. All right, so there's a human nature element to behavioral thing that you want to keep on to it in the long run, basically.
Yeah.
So I think there's many aspects towards that, actually.
I would like to pick up your mentioning that there is a fear, but also we talked about culture, and we have a question from the chat saying, we have a large organization here where failures might be career-ending events. So how can you change the culture and make experimentation part of this culture? And could you go into detail about what you meant by small team at high levels, these mixed teams of experts you are assembling?
And I'm sad to hear that you live in that culture, basically, because that's not a culture that is voided for experimentation. So basically, experimentation is a failure discipline. So if you don't fail a lot, then you don't learn anything at all. So there needs to be a culture within the organization. There needs to be sponsors within the organization that says you're allowed to go out and fail, but fail as cheap as fast as possible, because then those learnings will drive more new ideas, and at some point of time, those ideas will create the next revenue stream in your company. Yeah. Because if you're afraid of making the mistakes, you'll basically stay in the comfort zone, as you talked about, and it's not for any colleague or employee in such a company. And in thinking about innovation, it must be horrible to be there, basically, because you can't really explore that venue of that. Yeah. So I think that's and culture needs to be happening from the highest level of the organization. So get a sponsor as high as possible and have that discussion about how we can learn as best as possible and which benefits it creates. Because I talked about 90% of all the ideas that were killed. If I was living in a company that didn't allow failures, those 90% would have been progressed into that process and carried a lot of cost, and the customers would never be have liked that. So there's a drawback to that as well. So that's interesting. And then there was a question about the small team.
Small team at high level.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been successful with in Telia, is that my team is positioned quite high in the organization, meaning that we have a mandate when we go out to the organization and people listen to us. Because if we were just basically on the outskirts of the organization, we would never have that kind of mandate to drive the change that we and instill that culture that we have been able to do. So it's the structural part of it, and then there's the cultural part of it. And if there's no room for errors, make room for errors at some point of time, and even just start small. And so I think that would be the ambition here.
So speaking about room for errors and failures, and you learn most from failures. If you do these experiments and you create a landing page, do you do this under your brand company's name or under third party to reduce risks? What are suggestions here?
It depends. So the example that I showed with strawberry, we did it under the brand name because we did it towards existing customer base. So that's fine. Normally, when we do social media ads, we do it under incognito brand, which protects the mother brand, for one, from competitors seeing what you're doing, and also from eventual risks. But it also makes us move faster, because then you can move really fast. You're not dependent on the mother organization, which is a challenge for when bigger organizations are starting to do this type of experiments. To kind of how can you move as fast as possible, because that's part of kind of what you want to do. But yeah, incognito brands to move fast and reduce risk.
Yeah, and we've done both as well. So the beauty of doing incognito brands is that you test the raw value proposition on its own, because especially me coming from Telia, our brand is quite strong in Sweden. So if we go out and test something under the Telia brand and see the results, we really don't know whether it's the brand that is pulling or whether it's the value proposition pulling. Yeah. But it's been more difficult now actually to test without or in the incognito branding, because last summer there was a EU legislation about Digital Media Act, where when you actually do marketing on social media channels, you have to recognize and be vocal about where the money is coming from and who is the beneficiary of the ad. Yeah. So right now we are only testing within the brand. So we have a Telia prototype account both in LinkedIn and Facebook, where we test these things out. So we are a little bit away from the tactical stuff. Yeah.
And I mean so as an example, the initial example that I showed, my own personal project, you could that could be a bigger brand behind that. It could be, I don't know, Santa Maria or someone selling pepper. It's not more complicated than that, really.
No, exactly.
I like the idea that you mentioned. It's a way to clearly test the value proposition without any biases, influences from the brand, from the company, associations customers have with the brand.
Exactly. It's basically just remove as much pollution on the data as possible, because the data needs to be so clear that you can take the right decisions upon that. So that's why incognito testing is really, really strong.
Yeah, but I would also say that another benefit is when you have the goal of testing things as cheaply and quickly as possible, then you need to boil things down really well. You can't dwell on things for too long. You need to nail that proposition or nail a few ones. So that's also kind of built into a benefit built into doing this, because it needs to be concrete. It needs to be something that feels like it exists, even though it doesn't. So it's a good. It usually gives that kind of energy, momentum, and clarity within companies. Like, we can see what it is and we test it.
And speaking about this, the consumers have to have a clear picture, and of course, in a way, it's you have to deliver also at some point something. Are there any risks associated with this of showing customers maybe a product which does not yet exist?
Yeah, and just in itself, when you say that, that is of course a risk. So we call it the social contract with the customer. So if you don't have a very clear description or argumentation about how to collect the customer and respect the anticipation, then you will be a fraudster basically. So you have to only promise what you can deliver. So in the first stages of when you do testing, you only test for interest basically. Then it's just a click on a link to an article or something like that, or apply to a beta program, and then you pop up a screen and say it's not ready yet, but we'll make contact to you when you get there. The further down your line you get, the more and more meat you also have to the bone, and we've been doing cases where we manually have delivered the product behind the stages. So you all have to be very, very careful about this, because that's the holy grail of doing this. Because if you're not right there, you only do one experiment basically.
And I'd say it's really easy to do this wrong if you don't think of these aspects. Respect the customer, be transparent. But it's just as easy to do it really well, to reduce it to almost no risk at all, if you think of being respectful, being transparent, and then it works. Then it's super efficient.
Exactly.
I would like to pick another question from somebody from the engineering business, in saying, how would this look like for asset-heavy engineering companies focusing on B2B, of course, where development time takes multiple years?
Yeah, we actually discussed a little bit like that before we were going on, and especially when things takes a long time, then you kind of have to have that future picture in your head and say what happens in 2 to 3 years, and kind of extrapolate that back to now and say, what kind of value proposition would be interesting for the customers now? And that could be variations of, let's say, 10, 20, 30 different variations of that. And then say, but there's a core collection towards that future in 2 to 3 years. But if you can really validate that value proposition or element now, then you shouldn't be able to build that in the future. And it sounds easy when we talk about it. This is super difficult when you actually stand with it. And heavy equipment and long engineering times is... And hardware in itself is very difficult, because getting hardware in the hands of customers is always difficult. But there we have both AI tools and we have virtual reality tools, and we've also been testing in this area within the Telia company, but it's a little bit different. But again, extrapolating things into the different time zones is a really good thing to do.
We also have another question on idea generation, asking, whom do you typically involve in creating ideas, and what criteria do you apply for ideas to take the next step level?
I think it varies between the two of us. Maybe you should start.
And it varies between projects. But the first question, who do we involve? This is one of the steps where we involve our client's organization a lot, as much as we can. Sometimes it's a few ideation workshops facilitated by us with like 10 people. Sometimes it's 50 people, which is great to kind of get the knowledge from the organization and also like build in the kind of alignment and so on. But also so the client, but then we also, being part of the North Alliance network, I always build like a task force of experts from within NOA. So it's that mix of the client's knowledge and the creative and domain knowledge that we can bring that is really powerful in ideation sessions, I say.
Do you use any external sources, really external, of setting up a crowdsourcing contest, or?
It depends. Like sometimes it depends on the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way we also do some of those things, having great workshops and involve a lot of people. But overall, we have a belief, and I have a belief, that innovation should be the simplest, easiest process in the whole company. And I have 20,000 colleagues, and I think every one of them should be able to bring in an idea to the testing and the experimentation part. So I always say to everybody in our company, saying, if you have an idea, give me a call or write me an email, and instead of validating and vetting whether that idea is good enough or not, I'd rather test it in the market, and don't be the judge of that, because to be honest, there's too many innovation boards where there's probably old men taking decisions on innovation cases that they shouldn't really do, because they don't have the insights about the market. So I'd rather just test everything that we get inside the door very fast and very quick into the market, and let the customers in the market be the judge whether we should continue or not. And that makes the innovation process more open and more easy and more comfortable to participate in.
But I guess it refers a bit back to the cultural aspect, a data-driven decision process.
Yeah.
Sometimes in these established companies, as you said, or family businesses where they really like to take their decisions on their own. So it's hard to convince them, let the data speak, let the customer speak. And maybe one other thing, there is also this quote, customers sometimes don't know what they want, and they can't express what they want, and there is tacit knowledge and sticky information and all these concepts. So sometimes it's hard to grasp, really.
Yeah, I think an important way of how we use experimentation is it's one part of the decision-making puzzle. It makes decision-making easier because we have this data, and then of course people have opinions, and we have other signals and information to look at. But it's and a really important part of making the decision. The other one is that yes, even with people who are used to being having the mandate to take decisions on gut feeling, and I know best. Once you've seen this way of working, most people can't look back because it's so evident that, and once you realize it doesn't really threaten me, it's just one piece to put next to the other ones, then it's really powerful. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what you say. This is just one piece of the puzzle of the decision making, and often we have decision forums where we take decisions on PowerPoints and data and business cases and all that. But if there's not an evidence where we've tested a commercial asset in the market to understand where the customers are, then it should be brought back, basically, because then we take a huge risk on deciding on something. Of course, you shouldn't test everything. So you should only test things where there's unknown knowledge or there's things you don't know about. But the things you already know about, that's just execution and planning, right? So you should only test where you say, we don't really know how the customers will react to this new product or this new innovation. And then you go out and foster that data to come back to the decision table.
Referring to you shouldn't test anything, are there any cases where you feel like experimentation is not the right method to use?
I think the closer you come to the core, the more and more cases are there, because then we know what we need to do. So if you need to save, let's say, 10% of the supply chain, I think that's a proven method to how to do that. Then you just go and execute and do that. But if you want to find a new revenue stream for the company for the next 2 or 3 years, and you don't know which one, but you have a strategy pointing in one direction, then you test, let's say, a variety of 50 different tests and concepts towards that area to see what will stick to the wall, basically, and what we'll continue working on. And that gives you evidence to take the next step and the next step and the next step. So I think there's assumption mapping that's pretty cool tools out there as well, where you can apply these things. So the higher the risk, the higher the uncertainty,
Okay.
the better experimentation works.
Yeah. I would also like to go back a bit to the B2B context, because I also learned when my students are doing these innovation projects, it's easier B2C. You have a customer, you have a user, but B2B, it's difficult. You have sometimes different stakeholders. So any suggestions on how to set this up systematically for the B2B context?
Sure. I mean, it's not that different. The difference is that usually there are less customers in the market, B2B, and they buy, the way they buy your services or products it might be different. But so one way to test is, what type of evidence can you get from a B2B customer? Well, can you get their time? Can you get a meeting? So can you convert into how many of these calls or emails converted into a meeting, or letter of intent would be another way of doing it. So it's the same. The tricky thing is then you don't have this wide test base of which B2C usually offers.
It also depends a little bit, because I'm completely agree here. If you are at the early stages of exploration, then LinkedIn is a fantastic tool to utilize. And we've been trying to sell and test webinars for quite some time and say, let's put then 10 different webinars out to see which one is the most interesting part for this segment, to see, all right, they are interested in security and these kind of elements. Then we continue exploring down that path. And another thing is trade shows. We've been on trade shows where we had posters on the wall saying, basically inviting people to different webinars, and when they signed up, there was a waiting list. So who will have the longest waiting list after a few days? That's the area we should continue working more on. So there's, I think that exactly as you say, it's the same principles. It's just different medias and different channels you have to work with. And the further down your line you get, the more you get into the to the letter of intent and all that. But it's the same. It's exactly the same elements.
And the measurement for retention is different.
Yeah.
But I guess it also opens up a network of people. And we talked about this before, that even if you validate an idea, you don't always have to do it on your own. So there is a business network. There are smart people out there with whhom you can collaborate.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to build the next Netflix platform yourself. There's partners out there that can do that probably better than you as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's interesting.
I'm looking a bit at the time. Unfortunately, the time is up. So thank you, all of you, for joining us to this conversation on rapid commercial experimentation. There will be a recording available at the website of the House of Innovation. Thank you for joining, and of course, thank you, Klaus and Peter, for sharing your insights.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you.